What makes old fighting games so different? I'm already pulled in. This phrasing lets me know he's gonna be fair. Different. Not better, not worse, not whatever. I like Sajam.
Anyway, should we talk about old games today? A lot of like old
Was that a
games
no?
today. A
No.
lot of like old
Why is
games
is
good
better to
and
put
new
no?
games stinky is like the starting point, and then it just ends up with everybody squabbling. People saying, "No, actually, I think they're good," or "No, actually, I think they suck," and then that's the whole argument. They're too busy being like, "Here's why your game sucks." They never spend enough time talking about why old games are fun and why people like them.
I'm on the same page. I totally agree with that. And that's what I try to convey is the cool things about Third Strike. But even I am also guilty of this. I don't say like you should play Third Strike because it's better, but I still feel like I wish people would just try it and play it and get, put some time into it and then see how it is. Because I feel that most of the time people don't know what they're talking about with Third Strike. But that's really besides the point. It's really besides the point. I like his angle much better.
One of the most fun things about old games is that everything in them is hard to do. Now that sounds a little contradictory. Input readers for the games, the execution for the games, and doing basic actions because of the lack of buffer or how strict the game is about what it's demanding from you, either in terms of notation or like how the inputs are determined in the game, is so brutal that moving around the screen, air dashing, wave dashing, moving and grooving in them is hard to do. And that makes it so that once you learn to move around the screen in a way that's like fluid and solid, you feel so cool.
So what this reminds me of are those bullet hell games. Like Ikaruga, where you have to switch the color of your ship to match the many bullets so you can narrowly navigate. That's what I feel like Third Strike does. When you're at a certain spacing, you might want to parry low or forward while you're trying to whiff punish, and you're looking for the anti-air, and you're looking for a dash and throw. So it's like you're tap dancing around laser beams constantly. And then when you combine that with the execution difficulty, it's just a big dopamine, like the dopamine hits per minute are far more frequent. And that's what I think makes them a lot of fun, because there's so much room for human error, which I think is great. It's okay to make mistakes. It's not a big deal. I don't mind it.
Because there's naturally a barrier to do simple things, learning to get from not being able to do anything to making it to the fact that you can like do complex actions just happening all the time is really fun. It's a really cool part about old games. The first time I ever did like Gunflame, FRC, IED, like jump S, Sidewinder, you're just like, wait, I'm a fucking beast. And then you just do it without thinking. And they just constantly have these execution tests that your brain just has to send to your hands, and your hands has to not fumble for you to do simple actions all the time.
That's a key, is you feel like you are the one doing the work and not that the game is doing the work for you. And I don't like saying that because now I'm entering back into that territory where it feels like I'm dumping on the new games, but that's how I feel. That's the truth. I think that's exactly what it is.
Maybe thinking like, well, doing basic things is hard. That doesn't sound fun, but it is fun because it gives you something to chew on and learn for forever, because you can always improve without a second thought. You become like a new human. Like watching yourself play when you just everything clicks and you're moving feels so good. The other thing about old games, there's almost an infinite amount for you to dig into your own character and learn unique things about them, because the games are built in like an archaic way that there are almost always character specific combos and interactions. Basically every game has like, oh, this is my character's B&B, except it works on 2 characters. It drops on this and you can do like 5 sidewinders off that, and then the ender of my combo doesn't work here, but like this character, when they're crouching, you get this. And like there's so many things in the game that just don't work. So you have to find different solutions for every character, which means that you can find different ways to pressure, different ways for offense, different ways to approach in neutral, different ways to combo, 15 or 20 characters to dig into and find unique interactions and solutions over and over and over and over. In old games, it's like you need a character per combo oftentimes. Even if in the beginning you don't need it, eventually you can optimize and then have specific
Street Fighter 4 is an old game.
Right? Because these games, the old games especially, have less information about them, less completed bodies of work about where to find things. I would go to look things up, like what is the soul combo on this character? And there would just not be information about like what the correct combo is.
That's tight. Isn't that sick? You can be the pioneer. You can figure it out. Like, I feel like there's so much fun work to do. Like, Third Strike is more than 20 years old. Almost. 1999. Yeah. Yeah. It's an old game. But I'm learning things to this day. I just posted a video about Alex being able to hit confirm off of EX elbow slash into level 2. I never knew that. Maybe I did at some point 15 years ago when I forgot about it. But there's somebody in the comment section like, oh, this isn't common knowledge. So even the things that are figured out, it's really hard to know everything of what's possible. And I think that's awesome. That is what creates more unique situations. It's harder to get to that, what would be the end game. And because of that, and because of human error, it's hard to even get to it. And it makes it all like combined, and it's really fun.
I would have to like try to dig through and find match footage and like see what their combo is and then see why that combo is that way. But
having tech named after you doesn't happen anymore. Good. That was kind of corny. But the thought process is pretty cool. Like, this person discovered. I've never been a fan of saying I discovered something, but I think it's still cool.
But like, there wasn't that much match footage. I've never seen anybody else get this confirmed. Let me invent the combo myself. And sometimes it's cool and sometimes it's frustrating. It's like, dude, my combos just don't work on this character and there's nothing good to do in replacement. I can make a best case scenario, but my best case scenario still kind of sucks, and that can be frustrating, but it's part of the discovery of weird games like that. You may learn like a lightweight combo, and let's say there's like 5 lightweight characters in the game. Oh, this lightweight combo you worked, it actually only works on 2 of the 5 lightweight characters. The other 3, one combo works on one of them, and then the other 2, no one's ever tested what works on them because no one plays those characters, so good luck, go find it out yourself. And so much of old games is like that, where a lot of like what is out there is just what you personally know to do in your hands and brain against characters and in situations and matchups and stuff. So it makes them so personal. Let's say you're playing Street Fighter 6 and you're like, dude, I don't know how to be Blanca Ball.
Before he talks about Street Fighter 6, this same scenario. Again, Third Strike, 20 years old. Me and Alex Valle have a combined age of like 80 something. But I played as 12. I just uploaded that video. And I didn't know how to deal with 12 when he does a jump heavy punch, an air dash heavy punch from a distance, and I parry it. So I went into training mode and found out I can do EX Lariat no matter what the distance is. So next time I play him, I'm getting in there. He does that again. I'm looking forward to that. And that solution wasn't just handed to me. I had to go and figure it out and recreate it.
What do I do? You type into YouTube, how do I beat Blanca Ball? And it's like, what's up, guys? It's your boy Diaphone here. We're going to go over how to beat the 5 most annoying moves in Street Fighter 6. Make sure you like and subscribe. So let's talk about Blanca Ball. In the old game, when you're like, sole bad guy, how to combo Biken when I hit her with 5k anti-air and I super jump and I don't have bar to do force break sidewinder. Type that into YouTube and then see what happens. Even just dealing with basic things like how do you structure offense against Biken, because it's like its own challenge to figure out how to.
So if you have a video with sick things,
do pressure against her in the game. Modern games, everything has a solution. Like everybody everywhere will tell you how to beat or stop or handle every scenario. Whereas old games, even though people are trying, they're trying to like archive and show you how to do stuff and yada yada yada, etc. There's just like way less documented stuff out there, and it's like difficult to do because there's so many things to document. You can spend your own time and energy learning and engaging with the game and the system and like finding your own solution. And for a lot of people, that is really fun, and you can spend a lifetime doing it.
And I think for a lot of people, it's not so fun. That's where the modern video game argument can also come into play, where it's the dad who comes home who has 2 hours to play Diablo and he wants to raid. So having all this field to excavate, it's not really, you might get a few pebbles turned over if you're that person. So I don't know which one is the right choice. It's really fun. This whole process is really fun. And I wish it were fun to go home for 2 hours every day and turn over 3 pebbles. And be like, wow. I mean, maybe it is.
Finding unique and interesting and fun things that only you know how to do and only you know how to stop from other characters and stuff. You come up with some sneaky thing to do, and then your opponent goes for the common response, and then you have a sick counterplay ready, and you're just like, I invented this. And then you do it, and you're like, damn, I'm good.
Yeah, that is, again, here we go. Something that is harder to find in Street Fighter 6. where you go to somebody's character usage and you know that they have a signature, what they do, and how they solve problems. It's more of a blanket. This is how the character works, and not really as much as what they've discovered to the character. What I notice when I look through Street Fighter 6, I don't really look for matches. Even when I'm like looking for matchup analysis, it's hard to find matchups that are like where I think I'll see something new. It's pretty much limited to like Jamie, maybe Aki. Most of the characters I don't even have interest in watching because I know I'm not going to see anything different.
Inventing option selects in
what up,
Old
Paul B?
Injustice to like beat some character's option on Wake Up was so sick. It's just really cool because you know that it's yours. A thing about old games though that is also true is that they are hard to do this stuff in. And because of that, oftentimes learning something simple and good will carry you really far. In old games, everything you do is so strong because it's very unlikely that the other person ever knows how to deal with it, right? Like there's no good way for them to test how to stop it. There's no good resources about how to defeat it. Have you ever played a game someone new is like, oh, I just picked up this old game. You haven't played it in like 5 years, but then they'd been playing it for a while and you just boot up and play them and you beat them with like some level 1 strategy. And like they literally just don't know how to stop it, so they could never beat you. Unless you like spend time learning these specific gimmicks, you can't even make it to level 2.
Typically, that's fundamental, like strong fundamentals. Unless it's something like, if we're talking third strike, like an unblockable or an unblockable. Maybe like 100% stun from Makoto or a Denshin Ryu. A lot of those things come down to fundamentals and just good decision making, which is really hard to teach. It's actually really hard to teach that to somebody. It's one thing you have to kind of figure out on your own. You can guide somebody and show them why you do one thing or another, but at the end of the day, you can't make decisions for somebody. But you can explain to somebody why you might make one decision or another if it's a guess, or why you may focus on avoiding those situations where you got to guess. But a lot of times this happens, it's a fundamental thing. Like if you're playing my old friend, my old 50-year-old friend, if you're playing him in Super Turbo and you can't beat him, it's probably because you're jumping at the wrong times. And then he recognizes when you get scared of jumping and then he throws a fireball. It's like really Ryu Street Fighter 2 Turbo 101. How to get your opponent to stop jumping. You uppercut them. Okay, they stop jumping. Fireball. Maybe forward heavy punch. Get closer to them. So it's like the process of stripping away their options mentally that gets lost in a lot of the newer fighting games. It's absolutely still there. But it's harder to like force your will.
Learning gimmicks or like sharply pointed options for your character will take you so far. Whereas in modern games, like something I mentioned, like the Blanca ball, that will be solved so fast. Like people will come up with ways to deal with this. And in old games, generally the solutions are very specific for things. Whereas in new games, like almost always moves are designed with like
tech.
This move
they don't know about tech.
This strength and this weakness. And this is the natural counter to this move. We're not going to design something that's stupid and impossible to beat or something. We're going to design something that makes sense. And then in the old game, someone pulls out Zappa's sword. And then you're just like, surely this must have lots of counterplay and interactive design. It's a video game. There must be a way for me, the opponent, to deal with Zappa's sword. They were like, and then you just lose. Then you get to a game like Super Turbo, where like I asked James Chen, how does this matchup work? And he goes, oh yeah, the matchup's just like 8-2. This character hits this button and they just win. The other character can't do anything about it.
Super Turbo is that game where people bring it up and I'm like, I can't. This is I openly say Super Turbo sucks, but it's a beautiful, awesome, wonderful game that is enjoyable for a lot of people. But it's busted. It's not fair. It's not a fundamentally sound. It kind of was. I think it used to be, but the way it's developed over the couple years, it's insane. It's insane, that game. The way you got to play that game is ridiculous. I was playing my friend at the arcade a few days ago, and he knows a thing or two. He knows the cheap stuff. And some of the situations, I'm just like, I guess I just guess an uppercut. I guess I just jump at him. Like I have to play the mental part more than the reactionary part. Only time I felt like I was reacting if I was actually uppercutting a jump. The rest of it felt just unclear. I was like, oh my gosh, I totally proximity guard in Super Turbo is ridiculous. Like you're so far away from them, and you can whiff buttons and they can't walk away. I was like, what is this? It's just, but you also got to remember that game is ancient. That was like the first one, and they weren't making it for like a competitive whatever. I think what they accomplished is awesome. Like the beginning of and maybe it's not intentional, but the beginning of influencing how your opponent thinks, and then they have to make the adjustment to what they've done, like that whole mental battle. And there's two things, two storylines happening invisibly on the screen. It started with that. Eventually, maybe not so much, but it's still a cool game. But Super Turbo, hard to defend that one.
And I'm like, how do you beat it? And you're like, well, sometimes you do this and it works, but if you do this, they can do that to stop it. It's just you got to hope that they don't. And I'm like, okay. It's much harder.
Super Turbo's a miracle?
Games.
Yeah.
Not only are you throwing a weird knowledge check at them, but like navigating the game and doing basic things is harder. In Street Fighter 4, for example, when Balrog did dash punch and he was punishable by jabs, in a modern game, you would just hit jab and a DP and you would always punish it, right? But punishing Balrog dash punch in the old game was a one frame link on block with no buffer. So you could just like do moves or things that were unsafe. Your opponent was very unlikely to punish it. Great example of something like this. Filipino man plays Rose, right? And Rose is a very uncommon character and people don't know the matchup. Her EX drill was like -6 or something. I watched him at EVO do point blank EX drill -6 into Yosan Jury's face. Yosan missed the punish by so many frames that Filipino man crouch teched defensively on -6 and his button hit Yosan first. Part of what makes older games like that more difficult.
Oh, I want to see that real quick. What monitor was this? If this was Evo, they're probably using the Aces, which is 60 hertz and console. I think one thing that is not discussed enough is about how little we knew about hardware in those days and how much of an impact it has, and how I mean, we all pretty much played on PlayStation and 60 hertz monitors, but what if we had something that was better, like higher refresh rate and a platform that could play it better? So I'm also curious about, what's the truth about laggy monitors that we used to play on, because the technology wasn't there. Oh yeah, and CRTs. Street Fighter 4 was played on CRTs often. So when you combine hardware that is has variables to it, whether it's a CRT, a monitor, or a monitor that's laggy, and you have the execution barrier of Street Fighter 4, that also makes it really frustrating because you don't know what you're getting into. A one frame link with lag that might be 4, 5, 3, whatever it is, it's going to be hard to know exactly what that is. Like, you can't.
Difficult is also what makes them easier to be effective in. It's harder to do simple things, which means you get away with more, which means you can like do sillier things and you just don't get punished for it. Throwing stuff against the wall will work in them in some ways. Now, I'm not saying all the time, but it's what makes them a little loosey-goosey, and that's what kind of makes them interesting. Purify wrote a old game versus new game.
Hey, that's my friend. He wins everything. Not everything, but I don't know how he does it, who he practices against, but he wins. Like, if he goes to Frosty, he does really well in every single game he enters in, as far as I'm aware. And he won, I think, Koihime Embu one year. He's super good.
And
he's a friend of mine. I've known him for like 20 years.
Like, old games in some way are just like easier than new games because you can just like learn some things and then beat everybody up in it. And I think there's some truth to what they're saying in there. Like, the difficulty in learning plus R here, they wrote, on the other hand, Omito, Johnny, and Exer just in general didn't make many mistakes. He just did the good optimal thing pretty much all the time, and it was suffocating to win. This is because, yeah, Exert is a comparatively difficult game in the grand scheme of things, and Johnny's a hard character, for sure. But it's a ceiling that's more attainable because the game is the right amount of easier than the game before it, than plus R. That, however, makes it very, very hard to fight against in compared to plus R, where, again, pretty much everyone, even at their best, can be off guard at any moment due to its difficulty and speed of decision.
I think that's fair. The argument that something that is difficult to execute, if it's really if it's really powerful, then it makes it fair. I'm not so sure how I feel about that. Though I think there is some validity to it. But like Young and Agent, more and more people are able to do Daipon loops, Kara Palm, or even just the basic Agent combos. Does that make it okay? Does that make it better? No, I don't think so.
I think about this because I was watching the tournament where KB Nova was playing plus R. Everybody's like, oh, KB Nova Zappa is like so good. He beats everybody. He's the best. And then that Soul player, I don't remember who the Soul player was. In neutral, just kept doing Grand Viper or like Riot Stamp or like whatever over and over and over and over. KB Nova literally just like couldn't stop this Soul player from going fucking feral. KB Nova just dies to the Soul player, who then just like loses to everybody else. Yeah, like the Soul player was good, but like also if some Soul player pulls up and does that to Omito and Exerd, like he's dead. And I thought this post was really interesting. Honestly, this post is like a really fun way to think about it. Newer games are like everybody can reach a certain level easier, but also when you truly optimize at the top end, those players are like dominant. It's really hard to optimize old games and play them perfectly.
Yeah. The framing feels like you can make a fair sentence about anything. Like I said earlier, you can argue that Street Fighter 6 is more difficult for whatever reason. And you can argue that Third Strike, CVS 2, 4, 5, you could argue those games are harder than all the other games for a different reason. It's hard to get to the real truth. So again, I agree with Sajam's perspective that the most productive thing to do is just to emphasize how cool your game is and not really try to compare one or the other, because it just makes it more divisive.
You tend to have more room to like explore weird, strange interactions because people are like flubbing things constantly, and then new weird scrambles are happening, and then you have to make the best of those, and then you flub those, and then it gets weird, with rare exceptions of moments of brilliance. That's what makes them unique and different from modern games, where there's a lot less of that slippery nature. There's a lot more room to optimize and be correct more often and make less mistakes. Like if you can do everything in the game all the time always and never make any mistakes, then the game is probably not designed in a way that's compelling for competitive gamers to have fun in, you know. That's one of the challenges in modern games, is like finding ways for
Man, these are such hard sentences. Because it's like, yeah, but no, but yeah, I agree, but somebody else wouldn't.
When you're designing modern games, you have to decide where the difficulty in optimizing them will come from. Most games have decided that difficulty is not in execution, it's not in motion inputs, it's not in punishes. They give you buffers or leniency
decision making
windows to make things happen more consistently. So they have to test you in other ways. The biggest and easiest way for fighting games to make more challenging, interesting games is to make them faster. The faster a game goes, the more decisions you have to make, the more likely it is that you flub basic decision making constantly, right? If you
faster decision making, it depends on what those decisions are. I think I agree with what he's saying. Like the speed at which you have to think about what could or could not occur. That I agree with. But as far as the game speed, not so much. I don't know if I
look at my
that.
preferences over the years. I think a lot of people know that I'm a Street Fighter commentator. I've done a lot of Street Fighter in my life. But Street Fighter is very slow for my taste, right? Like a lot of the other games I like are way, way faster. I like versus games a lot. Guilty Gear, obviously.
Whatever,
KI
Austin.
is a very fast game. KI is like the drug addict version of Street Fighter, basically. The game is so fast to play, and it's so draining to play because you don't have almost any downtime in it. It's naturally just a really explosive game. But that game was built around the time where games were starting to like try and be like, okay, how do we make this a little simpler for people to get involved? So I think if you're making a modern game that is the speed of a game like Street Fighter, and it has the modern fillings, then afterwards you have to then figure out how do we add complexity to the game if we don't want to make the speed of the game outrageously fast, which is why things like the mini grid system or like the drive gauge system is what makes for more compelling games, because it gives you room to be wrong, to make your decision making kind of have to be snappy and different and unique in moment-to-moment decisions.
True.
Without it just coming purely from execution tests.
And what is unfortunate is when those resources that are interesting are overshadowed by, you know, a pretty simple game plan. As cool as this drive gauge management, super management, health management, and footsies are in the game and all that stuff, as cool as that is, there might be a person or two who really masters overspending their drive gauge and just pretty much going ham and overwhelming their opponent with offense. And you see a very popular player doing that right now. And it's not, I mean, it's actually pretty common, but to the extent that Noah the Prodigy does it, he's the master at going into burnout and then getting 12 bars of drive gauge. And it does in some ways overshadow the interesting parts of Street Fighter 6. So in terms of like the speed of the game is not the speed of decision making, I think. That is what is interesting. The decision making pace and the resource management weaved into that is what makes it really cool. Yeah, that's what I like. Sajam can convince me I'm good, and I'll believe him. Can you argue difficulty in execution and speed of recognition though? The difficulty in execution is like combos, and is that the way you get that combo and the amount that combo is rewarding, that's different from the speed of recognition, which I think is both offense and defense. So things like hit confirming, blocking overheads on defense, your spacing habits and recognizing your opponents. I think those are definitely different. Difficulty in execution and speed of recognition. And maybe I'm not sure what you mean. Faster game means less decisions. Speed of decision means harder decisions. It depends. Depends on how fast you die too. There's so many factors that go into it. It's hard to really nail it down. What's good. I remember asking the Punch Planet developers. I asked them, like, how do you decide whether something is fair, whether it's good, where the hurt box should be, how much hit stuff, like all this. How do you put this together? And basically their answer was, I don't know, man, you just try it and see how it feels. And it's probably the best way. Like, what do you measure as the reactionary window? Like, no, man, just try it and see what happens.
Or like the control of the game being nebulous. Adding an additional meter, like another lever to pull when you're backing up the bus and then going this way, and then you got to pull this lever here, and then you're doing this, and then you're juggling. Like, the more things you can add on top of what you have to do, the wider the decision-making space becomes, the more difficult doing basic things becomes. Like, the more likely it is you flub things and you create a more interesting game with lots of decisions.
But human error is sick. It's really cool to see mistakes, and it's cool to see when somebody doesn't, when they thread 3 needles in a row. I think they're all cool. It's all cool.
When people do manage all those things well.
Oh, but the problem, I think, on the development side is when you put too many elements, variables to the game, it's hard to account and balance that. And you might end up getting something like, even in the old games, CVS2 roll canceling. That's definitely not intended, but it happened to be cool. But it's kind of like luck. Like, oh, this happens to be kind of fun. Not much we can do about it. If we're going to play this game, we're going to have to deal with it. So, I mean, you know, whether that's your cup of tea or not is up to...
It's fun to watch. And
up to whatever.
Impressive. And it makes for a cooler game. This whole talk was not to discourage anybody from liking either, because I like both styles of games. When games are, like, so hard that doing the hardest stuff is, like, very, very difficult for most humans to do all the time, then you can make a game that's fun and interesting to optimize long term. And, like, when I say optimize, I don't even think most people probably do. They just, like, try to be as optimal as they can.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I really like the mind games of fighting games, but, like, I didn't want to learn how to do a motion input. I'm like, dude, you'll play Helldivers and you'll resupply, which is a fucked up tiger knee motion backwards.
Down, upright.
Magnetic blast in Marvel 3, but you're telling me you can't fucking throw a fireball in a fighting game? You can do motion inputs under extreme duress when there's 7 Bile Titans, but when you're sitting there doing those, like, quarter circle turns.
That's me.
Fireball with Ryu, it's too hard. You guys are gonna look me in the eyes and tell me that shit is too difficult? Bet. Just say you don't want to do it. Just say that you don't like how Ryu looks. I'd rather fight Ryu.
Yeah, y'all know Sajam. I know this. What does my plug do for a giant? Sajam on YouTube, on Twitch. You know, I'll link the video in the Twitch chat. That's a great video. Sajam, I see like 99% of the time, I'm like, yeah, he's right. Yep. What do I have to add? Yeah, that's pretty much it. What else is there to really say except for I like the emphasis that just demonstrating or not, don't even demonstrate, just be the example and play that game whether you stream or not. Just enjoy. There's such a weird dialogue, especially when new games come out, to go complain about it on Twitter, which is understandable. Yeah, that's why I've been liking Third Strike a lot lately, because all that's said and done, I do wish in some ways that Street Fighter 4 and Street Fighter 5 could experience what Third Strike is experiencing right now, where nobody's playing that game against their will. That could be said for some of the recent history, where people are playing a game that they don't like for whatever reason. And that's not to say that there aren't redeeming and fun qualities about those games that kind of keep you in it. Like, for me, Street Fighter 6, it has enough fun and cool things that I'll probably boot it up again, especially when they drop a patch, Season 2. But I think focusing on what is fun is really what it's all about. Yeah. Sajam could make me believe delay-based netcode is better than rollback if you wanted. He can make one of those videos where he's like looking at the camera, like one of these, and it says, "I was wrong about rollback." Oh, let me click on that. I hate that. Man, I'm trying to take the YouTube game more seriously lately. I might have to end up doing one of those videos, but in a mocking way. Really sad face. It's time to have a serious talk. The future of this channel. One of those.